So I got myself a summer cocktail to make this summer top, and you should go and get yourself something nice to drink too, because if you're in a relaxed, nice mood, it's always easier to start sewing projects. Cheers to that! Hey there, this is me, and this is another out of the blue experience tutorial where we are going to do a tie top made out of pure silk ties. I came up with this idea because I saw that Shop Lottie uses silk ties for hair braids, and I thought this is a brilliant idea because there are a lot of silk ties out there which are not worn anymore these days and which are made out of really high quality material and nice fabric, which you can see here. For example, this is pure silk, dark blue, and here you have a white tie structured. And I thought, let's give it a try. Let's try out making a top, which kind of reminds to a bikini top, but I think it's amazing how many options you have to wear it. And it's also a really nice top for summer times, and you can change the styles, and it's reversible. You can wear each side to the outside depending on the style you want. And then you have here one tie I used to make this thin ribbon to make it also very flexible in the way how you want it to wear. I made them really long, and I'm going to show you how to do this. It's really easy. Oh, and by the way, if you don't have ties, or your boyfriend or your father or your grandpa does not have ties, it's really easy to go to the next thrift store and you will find tons of ties, and you can decide which colors you like. You need 5 ties, and because it's a reversible style, I recommend you to use some kind of colors out of the same color range, because as you can see here, you do see a little tiny bit of the other side here at this edge, or as you can see here at this edge, but it does not matter, or it does not look bad because it's blue, and here it's blue white, because these are all colors you can see when you wear the top. So I think this is a nice way to reuse all the ties which are out there in the world and are not worn anymore, since Steve Jobs started the normcore trend. So let's start by ripping off all the ties. Start by removing the labels and the loops if there are some, and then open the tie at the inside seam. Take out all the fabric, which most ties do have, to keep them in the typical shape. Then rip off the lining. Repeat this with all the ties you have till you have plain silk fabric stripes, and then iron them. And now is the time to decide on the look of the top. One tie will become the long, thin ribbon, and we will now decide which one. Put this one tie aside, we will need it in a minute. And then we decide which 2 fabric patterns should never be seen together, because they just are the least matching ones. These will become the 2 silk stripes you will sew together. If you do not have that problem, good for you. But anyways, the right fabric sides of the dismatching ties need to face each other, and maybe they will come along, because remember, the more we differ from someone, the more we can learn from each other. And the other 2 ties need to face each other too. After that, we have a staple of 4, and now we cut the wider side straight like this, and then we cut the long edges. If you need help, ask someone smaller than 1 meter, because no grown-up will ever volunteer working on the ground like this and not getting paid for it. At the end, we cut the short edge. I decided to make a spicy angle because I like spicy food in summer as much as a sharp angle. And in German, spicy and sharp is actually the same word. Therefore, this sometimes confuses me. But let's just get back to where we were. So because one tie was shorter, I also had to attach a tiny piece of fabric by cutting it and sewing it with 7mm seam allowance and then ironing it apart. If you're lucky enough, your ties will all be the same length, or you can decide to cut them all the same length. But I recommend you to leave the ties as long as possible, because then you have like more options to wrap it around you. So let's skip to the long thin ribbon, and therefore we need the tie we put aside earlier. My tie was wide enough to cut 3 stripes in the width of 3 centimeters, and because we need really long ribbons, I sewed these 3 stripes together. Therefore, put them onto each other in a 90-degree angle and sew in a 45-degree angle. Then cut the seam allowance and iron it apart. Now we sew the ribbon, and one tip to make it flip easier: either way, you use a long loop turner, or you just tear sewing thread out of the machine before you start sewing, and you do not cut that sewing thread. It should have almost the length of the ribbon, and then you fold the fabric of the ribbon, put it underneath the sewing machine, and within the fold you place the sewing thread, and then you start sewing. And make sure that the sewing thread is placed like really tight in the fold, so that you're not sewing above the sewing thread, because you need to tear at this thread at the end, and then the whole thing turns inside out. And like I said, once it's done, just tear the sewing thread and it will turn inside out really easy. Remember this tip for upcoming tutorials, and also for whenever you need a really long ribbon, because it will make everything so much easier. So now we're done with the ribbon. Cut it in half and put it aside. And now we will sew the paddle-like other pattern pieces together, because in summer we desperately need paddles to navigate our boat through summer. We start with a wide edge, or as you could also say, the tip of the paddle. Sew the 2 dismatching ties with a top stitch together and iron afterwards to get a nice edge. Then continue with the long side, starting where we just stopped with a wide side. But attention, leave a gap of 1 to 1.5 centimeters open, because we will need a tunnel here to insert the ribbon we made before. Then sew along the long edge and then the small edge, and then iron the edges before you close the last long side. It's just easier to iron the edge nicely when it's still open. And at the end you close the other long side, but leave a gap to turn the whole piece inside out. But before you do that, cut the seam allowance in each corner, because then when you turn it inside out you will get nice sharp edges. Turn it. Once you're done, iron as long as it takes to make all the edges look perfect. Then repeat the same thing with the other side, because every boat needs 2 paddles. When we have both parts for right side and left side, take a needle and thread and close the gap by hand. And now we only need to top stitch parallel to the wide edge to get the tunnel. And then we are almost light at the end of the tunnel. Take a safety pin, insert the ribbon through the tunnel, and then you just take the ends of the thin ribbon and you stuff them inside of the ribbon. If you want to, you can just close it by sewing 2-3 hand stitches, or you just leave it like that because it won't fall out anyways. And now, if you like that kind of content, if you like sewing tutorials, if you like fashion design content, feel free to subscribe, and hope to see you next time. Bye bye! Ties do always go good with shirts, so if you feel a little bit naked or that you're showing too much skin wearing this top, just add a man shirt.